All right. Good afternoon. Welcome. We'll call to order the meeting of the Delaware County Board of Elections for October 13th, 2021. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know, I have to say, it's John's second meeting, and he just taught me something. I've sat in this room for 15 plus years. I've always turned my back to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I never realized that flag was there until I saw John. I'm like, what is John looking at over there? And there's a flag. So, another tremendous benefit of your addition to this board.
Well, that's yet to be seen, I think.
The next item is the consideration of the agenda. And it was pointed out to me that there was a oversight in that there was not a item for public comment, general public comment at the end of the meeting. As you know, it's our practice. We take public comment on any action item before we take a vote, limited to the item that we're considering at the time. And then we typically have a period at the end for general public comment. So unless there's objection, we'll add that to the agenda. If there's any other suggestions for the agenda?
No. Thank you.
All right, so we will proceed with that agenda. Next is the approval of the minutes. The minutes were distributed to the board and the staff earlier this week. We've had a chance to review them. Does anybody have any comment or recommendation of changes?
I did review them. They're certainly very thorough. I think that my personal opinion would be, again, I guess it depends on what your view of the minutes is. Under Pennsylvania sunshine law, the minutes is just simply a recount of the action that's been taken. These are lengthy minutes where it tries to capture all the comments, and I think it does a good job. However, I think you also, when it gets to be that long and tries to capture all the comments, you get into not subjectivity, but it's not an exact transcript. So I would encourage us perhaps. And this is not, I'm not trying to not be transparent, but it also, once you get into dozens of pages, of minutes, I don't have a problem with it. I don't, object to the minutes. I'll vote to approve them. But I also think that we should shorten them to capture, the topics and what was said. I think if we get into McBlain said this and McBlain said that, I read it and I was like, well, I'm not sure I exactly said it that way, but I don't disagree, but I don't know because I didn't take a transcript of it. That's the kind of stuff I just would point out.
Yeah, John, I understand with what you're saying, and I frankly, similar thoughts occurred to me. I know that Amanda works very hard to put those minutes together, and it's a lot of work, but at the same time, we are recording all the meetings now. And broadcasting them and so forth. So to the extent the public wants to see what happens, the public can very much see what happens. So, perhaps going forward we could consider doing more of the minutes like you suggest, and that, there was a discussion of the ballot preparation. Mr. McBlain spoke in favor, Mr. Lawrence spoke in favor, Ms. Luckenheimer spoke in favor, et cetera, as opposed to having to put the substance of the comments.
Yeah, and if Amanda prepared them, I commend her. I think she did a great job trying to capture everything. It's a lot to capture, but when we attempt to sort of do a sentence by sentence recount of the meeting, it becomes difficult. And like I said, there's nothing in there that I really have an objection to, but I've run into that in different bodies where you get halfway through and somebody says, I didn't say it like that, and so you end up fighting over nothing.
Right.
But like I said, I think we can fulfill all the requirements of the Sunshine Law, be transparent to the public, and have a different format for the minutes.
I have no issue. In fact, it's interesting you say that with your new perspective, because we have had the times where we've had trouble making sure we wanted to be extra transparent because of COVID. That it did, the way it was written, sometimes it looked like a motion, for example, that I moved for was therefore sponsored by me. So I agree with you that perhaps just more process oriented, and we can review it with that eye. But I do think, Amanda, thank you for your work on that. It was certainly a lot of work, and I think this is a good adjustment, so I'm in support of that.
All right, so with that being said, let's then actually have a motion to approve the minutes from the September 20th meeting.
I'm gonna move to approve them.
I will second the motion.
Motion being made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
No one's opposed. The motion carries. Next is Mr. Allen's report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This afternoon, just giving you an update on various aspects of the preparations for the November 2, 2021 municipal election. First off, on ballot preparation and testing, we've completed more testing of the ballots for this election than we ever have for any other election. So first, in reviewing all of the offices and the candidates at the Bureau in the Wharf, Lorene put together a team to double and triple check all of the different ballot styles, 428 of them, one for each precinct. Then we performed at the warehouse logic and accuracy testing with the touch writers and the scanners, marking up ballots and making sure that it flagged, completely undervoted pages and whatnot. Next, we completely reviewed for the first time a set of what's called test decks of pre-marked ballots provided by our ballot printer. And this is actually a tabulation test to determine that a certain number of marks for different candidates tallied properly, and ballots from all 428 precincts have been tested. Finally, in a process that we first performed this past spring, we have Jim Warner, a staff member, out at the printing facility while the election ballots are being printed, and before they get shrink wrapped, before they get boxed, he's running them through a scanner that's set for universal so that it can check for any one of the 428 precincts and making sure that they will scan properly even before they get on the truck. So that's an important process that we're very pleased that we've added in addition to the first ever test deck. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have on that.
I don't. You've advised us about this process, so I don't know any.
I might add that the tests came out 100%, so of the tabulation. The ballot mailing was delayed after the vendor subcontractor received some faulty envelopes. The first drop is anticipated tomorrow. We were hoping that it would hit the mail today. It is anticipated tomorrow. The Voter Service Center, we're going to have the Voter Service Center again like we did in the primary here at the Government Center in Media only. We have a severe labor shortage, and in evaluating what we must focus on for this election versus what could be considered luxuries, I had to make the decision to not open outside voter service centers, given our many needs at the warehouse, at the wharf, with vote by mail and absentee applications, with the drop boxes, and in media, at voter registration, and in the Bureau office here. So the Voter Service Center in Media is operational, will be officially open tomorrow, Thursday, and then it'll continue to be open through Election Day. The daily hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m., but on Wednesdays we'll stay open till 8 p.m. And then on Saturdays we'll also be open starting this Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon. And then on Election Day, we'll obviously mirror the hours that the polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Next.
And I think it's worthy of comment that, there are some persons that are disappointed that these other centers aren't open, but that the labor issue is significant. And I know Mr. Allen went to somewhat extreme measures and pursued many options to try to get us a more substantial workforce. But I think as a lot of folks know from just reading the newspapers and seeing what other businesses are doing, there is a difficulty in finding persons to staff a lot of businesses, not just the Board of Elections, and we have the resources that we have, and we have to deploy them strategically, and that certainly it was our experience in the past that the media voter service center was the most heavily used, and the prudent thing to do would be to focus our resources there and have that operating at full speed, and not have the other one. So, please know that Mr. Allen worked diligently with the county and the staff and the Board of Elections to try to find staffing, and it just doesn't exist right now.
We're also issuing a public call through the Public Relations Department for additional staffing, because we still have positions that we will need to be able to staff our pickup and drop-off locations, as well as our phone bank and our rovers on Election Day, as well as at the wharf when we're handling the V drives, as well as 42 people, 46 really when you have backups, for people who will be ready to close the drop boxes promptly at 8 p.m. on election night. These are paid positions, and if anybody watching this video cares to, they can contact Patty Carfagno in our office, and I know Mr. Hurlinger is going to be putting out a news release on this as well, and reaching out to all kinds of community members, community organizations, the political parties, what have you, to try to fill some of these non-political positions that have to do with just the sake of good order of helping us process everything from vote-by-mail applications to servicing voters and poll workers on Election Day. So next, vote-by-mail absentee application processing. The Bureau staff has really done a remarkable job at the wharf. They've been working to remain current in processing all online and mailed-in applications, coming in on Columbus Day, making sure that we're staying current so there is no backlog. Next, on poll worker training, I'm pleased to report that we've received very good feedback on our training sessions, which are also conducted in this room, and they've incorporated a very excellent Patty and Christina Iacono. Patty Carfagno have incorporated an excellent PowerPoint presentation that accompanies all of the lack of a hands-on, but we have all of the equipment there. So there are a lot of questions, particularly about the two-ballot election and how to spoil. If somebody returns only with one spoiled ballot, the first one gets fed through the scanner and they come back with one, so we have a procedure for that. We have a procedure for abandoned ballots where perhaps somebody just does not vote or does not cast one of the two ballots and leaves it in the voting booth, and how to account for that, make sure that the counts are still proper at the end of the night. So those are the areas that we're really zeroing in on, as well as just how to work with the voters in the best way possible.
Mr. Allen, before you move on, sometimes those of us deep in the weeds lose sight of the fact that others following along at home might not understand what the two-ballot election is. Can you explain why there are two ballots and that it wasn't our choice and it's a state law, et cetera, and the importance of this?
Yes, under the Pennsylvania Constitution, the judicial retention ballot has to be on a separate page, a separate ballot entirely. So as a result, all of your state and local contests are going to be on the A ballot, and it's going to have an A in the upper right-hand corner. And then the judicial retention questions on whether or not a list of judges should be retained and kept in office are presented on a B ballot. So we've gone to various measures to make sure that this is done correctly. We work with the printer and the specifications to make sure that the ballots actually come to the warehouse shrink-wrapped, stacked, collated, A, B, A, B, A, B. So there's not a need for the poll workers to pull out two different shrink-wrap packs and remember to be handing out one of one and one of the other to each voter. So then we're instructing our poll workers as far as what to watch for on the scanner, for example, because the A increases the count of voters. The B does not, but the B does increase the count elsewhere on the tape of how many pieces of paper were in there. So it's a little wrinkle, and the legislature has voted to make this go away once. They need to vote in a second session before it can be presented to the voters to make this, to amend the Constitution so that we can go to a more sane and reasonable process of voting on one ballot. So that's why, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing that up. For the logic and accuracy testing, I'm going to invite Mr. Savage up to talk about this because in spite of being understaffed, the warehouse has just done a remarkable job.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As was noted, we've been severely short-staffed at the warehouse. We haven't been immune to national trend. Our deadline for logic and accuracy testing for all the precinct level equipment and the equipment that we'll deploy with rovers is end of business this coming Monday. It's about close to 1,400 pieces of equipment. I'm happy to announce that we finished it about an hour ago.
Terrific. Congratulations.
Awesome.
And voter registration is current on all online and mail-in applications. Next, the drop boxes, they're wrapping up the opening of those today so that they're ready to receive any ballot return envelopes by 8 a.m. tomorrow. And please note that even though the printers are handling the vote by mail ballots and mailing those out, our in-house operations, we're handing people at the Bureau vote by mail and absentee ballots over the counter, and those voters may want to return those ballots now. And as well as the wharf operation has been working on processing all the absentee ballots, which are a separate category under Pennsylvania law, and those have begun going out and are continuing to go out now. So the absentees are going out. So we want those drop boxes. They're going to be open by 8 a.m. tomorrow for voters to begin using. Next, our pickup and drop-off sites. We had at the primary 3 locations for judges to pick up their materials before Election Day. These are everything from, provisional materials to different forms, the poll book, what have you. And we had a site at Rose Tree and a second one at the Emergency Services Center in Sharon Hill, and then our third one was at Upland Park. And this time there's an event on the Saturday when the pickups occur, the Saturday before Election Day, at Rose Tree. So we're not going to be able to use that, but we've worked with the park police and voter registration to be able to offer for those precincts that would have gone to Rose Tree Park. They're going to be coming to the government center. They're going to be able to access the parking garage C. And then many of the precincts that formerly went to Sharon Hill are now going to go to the Wellness Center in Yeadon, and we'll have a tent operation there, like we did at the Emergency Services offices. Then we're moving from Upland Park to the wharf directly for the southern precincts, all the way from Tinicum all the way over to like Marcus Hook. And those precincts will be going to the wharf to do their pickup there. Fortunately, there's a soccer game, but it's on the Sunday in between our pickup and our drop-off, so that won't interfere. And then on election night, the folks who do the pickup at the government center are going to be picking up at Rose Tree, and then we'll return to Yeadon and the wharf facility in Rivertown. So we'll have tents set up there and be able to operate those. So we're also working with park police so that we have what we hope is a more rapid transfer of the V drives from these sites to the wharf for processing on election night. The goal being to get election results reported earlier at night than we have in the past. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
You have a question, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, John.
For the pickups, I know oftentimes the judge of election can't make it. Just so the public knows, who, absent the judge of election picking the materials up, who are authorized to pick up the election materials and hold on to them till Election Day?
Ideally, that should be the majority or the minority inspector as an alternative, but sometimes it can be the son of the judge of election or daughter of a judge of election. We try to limit that, those situations, and try not to, hand those out, but, it's not like, but we capture a driver's license for each person who makes a pickup of materials.
Okay.
So we capture an image of that so that we're able to track if there are any questions afterward as far as who made the pickups and whatnot.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
I would also add, there's a form for the judge of elections to designate someone to pick the materials up in that judge's place. And really, the proper approach here would be to have the judge of elections complete that form, so whoever's showing up is showing up with that executed form showing the judge of elections has signed off on this other person picking up the materials.
I guess it's understandable, and I don't really have an answer in terms of how you check this, but, ideally, obviously, you'd want the judge of election to sign a form if they're not able to make it. Also, ideally, you wouldn't want the person picking it up that the judge of election is nominated to be a local candidate, or somebody that has an interest, in the outcome of the election. So, like I said, I don't have some silver bullet on how, there's some supercomputer that cross-checks all that, but obviously, if we could restrict as much as possible, understanding that practically we need to get these materials out, and have some pay attention to that in terms of who the election materials are released to.
I think, John, you are, again, showing that you're a very quick learner in that this is an issue that there's been some considerable focus on in the last, say, year or two. That, historically, 10 years ago, there was a lot of places where the political party leader in certain towns would pick up all the materials for all the precincts in that town, and, there's a different level of scrutiny and so forth that has developed in this process. And I know the staff has recently, in the last few elections, began to focus on this and make sure that we get these forms. And, there's still, maybe some instances where there's a phone call that so-and-so got sick this morning and this person's coming, and, there has to be some level of understanding and trust, et cetera. But I 100% agree with you. This is important, and Mr. Parks has focused extensively on this idea of a chain of custody, really beginning, a year and a half ago at the first primary, where he was the solicitor, and establishing a log of chain of custody of materials so that we can determine who touched what when, and have a path to trace things back if something's out of order. So,
excellent.
This is an area of focus, and it can continually be improved, but it certainly is something that has the people's attention and is being worked on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman and board members, that's all I have for today. The next item being the polling place changes.
All right, Mr. Savage, welcome back.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. Just 3 changes. Upper Darby 7-1 and Upper Darby 7-6. These were pretty problematic precincts for a while now. We have a bipartisan agreement to move both of these precincts to Careview Community Church. Inspection report is in your materials. I'd like to thank the church leadership for working with us to address some initial accessibility issues. Anyway, it's a bipartisan agreement. We recommend that move.
Okay. Is the Aston one controversial at all?
It's not controversial, but it's recommendation of voting machines. You want me to just go to it?
Yeah, we could do them both together.
Okay, so Aston 2 normally votes at PHCC of PA. That's a plumbing school. On Mount Road, that building is under construction. We just found that out last week. So it's a pretty difficult precinct to find an appropriate facility, but Aston Elementary School, where Aston 3 already votes, is right on the border of that precinct. So the voting machine, it's recommendation of voting machine department to move Aston 2 from PHCC of PA to Aston Elementary School.
All right. So can we have a motion for precinct changes for Upper Darby 7-1, Upper Darby 7-6, and Aston 2?
So moved.
Second?
Is anybody here from the public with comment on any of these matters? All right, any discussion?
No.
All right, call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There being no one opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Legal notice. Lorene?
That's open on all. Is that vote on all? Yeah, yeah, okay.
I usually, unless there's a...
Yep, that's fine.
So we just do them all together.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the board. I have before you several of the legal notices that we put out in the newspapers, 2 newspapers of general circulation that identify the various tasks that the 3 election divisions undertake during the election. Do you want to have it as one item or?
Yeah, we can do the one vote
Okay.
for all of them.
The first is the notice of the central automatic tabulation testing of our equipment. The second notice is the proclamation of an election. The next is a sample ballot to show the type of ballot and the layout that people will see on election day. Another item is a listing of all the polling places for the county on election day. The next notice is in the inaccessible polling places, so that voters know if they are in one of those inaccessible, they can apply for an alternative ballot. The next notice is the pre-canvass and canvass of the absentee and mail-in ballots commencing at 7 a.m. on election day, and then the canvassing beginning at 8 p.m. on election evening. The next notice is the return board notice. That is when the votes begin to be reviewed at the warehouse in Chester. The next notice is a notice of the counting or reviewing of the provisional ballots to determine what is a qualified ballot or not. The next is a notice of the canvassing of the absentee ballots from the military and overseas voters, otherwise known as the UOCAVA. And then finally, also included in that count would be any provisionals that are qualified to be counted and anyone who had ID issues that's satisfied during the legal guidelines set forth by the state.
All right, and so the public knows, Ms. Hagan distributed these to us yesterday. We've had a chance to review them. Is there a motion to approve the legal notices as detailed by Ms. Hagan?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any comment? With that, we'll call a question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
No one being opposed, the motion carries and the notices are approved. Anything else, Ms. Hagan?
Thank you. No, I do not.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you. And do we send those notices to the respective party chairman so that we send them by email perhaps later
Yes.
this afternoon, so they'll have all the dates and not have to wait for the newspaper.
Okay, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I will do that this afternoon.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, are you going to do the campaign expense waiver form, or, okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Recently, I was contacted by a representative of the Libertarian Party who inquired about a waiver of expense account reporting affidavit when submitting the political body and minor political party nomination forms. Well, currently on those forms, there was no way for the candidate to waive the campaign finance requirements. And we queried other Pennsylvania counties, and they have adopted a form that they use per Act number 1980-127. Therefore, Delaware County has adopted to use the same type of form. And I believe you had that form in front of you.
Okay. And so the public can understand this, that the campaign finance reporting rules can be opted out of if you, as a candidate, perhaps for local office where you don't intend to raise any more than $250, you can opt out of having to file a report. In the past, I don't know that we ever really kept track of that. It was just if you didn't file a report, we assumed you were less than $250, but now we're going to begin to keep track of that,
Correct.
and we've developed a form in order to do that.
Yes.
Mr. Parks, do you have any comments regarding the form?
I've looked at the form. The form is in order. I also understand that this matter was raised with the Department of State, and initially the Department of State gave a cryptic response, and then when we spoke and canvassed our neighboring counties and learned that they had this form, we circled back to the Department of State. They said, oh yeah, actually, that's okay. So initially they said, law didn't contemplate it. We thought that meant you couldn't do it. Then we found out our neighboring counties are doing it. We went back and said, how do we reconcile this? And they're like, oh yeah, the law doesn't contemplate it, but we allow it. So we've cleared this with the Department of State after a little bit of a runaround.
All right. Seems to make sense to me that we should keep track of who's opted out, and then we know who didn't file, so. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I understood. Let me just clarify, make sure I did. So Ms. Tyson, you described that this would be for candidates that are nominated by nomination papers rather than petitions.
Correct. Or substitute
I presume
papers.
that on those nomination papers, there's not a waiver of expense account reporting affidavit,
Exactly.
unlike the nomination petitions.
Exactly.
So this form, which I think is excellent, it looks good to me. This would be used for those candidates.
Correct.
Okay.
And for write-ins too, right?
Yes.
And for write-in
For
candidates.
write-ins that, you know.
People who win the election,
Yep.
the primary by write-in, right, because they haven't filed nomination papers.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right. So can we have a motion to approve the form?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, oh, well, is there any,
Listed as an action item, actually. Is this a,
I believe, I defer to Manley on this, but I believe the board still may vote on it since it is on the agenda, even if it's not listed as an action item per se.
I think in the future, it would be appropriate to try to make sure that we have everything that's going to be voted on. But as an action item in this instance, I believe it would be appropriate to proceed to adopt the use of the form. I would also note, I don't know that the board actually has to
Right.
vote on this.
yeah, as I began to think about it,
Matter.
I just,
believe that, this could be an informational point that the board doesn't have to vote on, but simply if there were questions or concerns, the board could raise them. Otherwise, to me, this is an administrative matter and a more informational fair that this form's going to, the adoption of this form will be put into use and adopted and going.
yeah.
I don't know that it's a vote exactly.
Yeah, I kind of feel, it's not like we vote on every other form that gets used. I just kind of made the assumption it was on our list, and I just started taking action on it. So unless anybody here feels,
we joined you, Mr. Chairman.
unless anybody here feels differently,
No.
it's confident that this is, or comfortable with this being administrative action, and why don't we withdraw a motion?
Withdrawn.
Motion's withdrawn. So there we have it. Anything else, Ms. Jackson?
I would just like to update you on the item from our last meeting. The
Yes,
First
ma'am.
Republican Club of Aston Township, I was contacted by a person who purported to be the treasurer, and I emailed him the registration form to legally make him a treasurer. I have not heard back yet, so we're still
All right.
waiting on that one.
Well, hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that eventually.
Yes,
All right.
that was all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll take, is there any general public comment? Anyone in the audience like to make comment about anything? Yes, ma'am. Would you please come to the microphone and introduce yourself, your name and where you're registered to vote within the county?
Hi, my name is Ruth Moton, M-O-T-O-N. I live in Upper Chichester, Pennsylvania. I thank you for allowing me to come up here and speak and to see you guys in person. My questions that I have is for the polling for 11-6 and 11-4 in the city of Chester. The poll workers, I don't know, were they all changed out within the city of Chester? That's a question that I have because I was a watcher during the primary, and when I came in, they were writing within the polling place, which one of the precincts, the judge of election, that was the election that you did not certify due to the voter fraud. But the thing is, the woman, Ms. Stokes, who was working as judge of election, her daughter was there also working and also won her write-in campaign for minority inspector. I'm sorry?
So that matter was referred to the district attorney's office, but
So
I want to
for-
let you finish
Okay.
asking your question.
No, so that's fine. I didn't know. That was the mother who, for the judge of election, because there was the Republican on the ballot, Carla Cardwell.
Yes.
But minority inspector, there wasn't anyone on the ballot for that position. Both of them worked the polls that day. The other side, there were two precincts that voted within the same location at Wellington Ridge. That gentleman who worked as judge of election, he won his write-in campaign as well. But there just wasn't a harmed party to come to you and say, look, I was on the ballot, but this is me bringing it to your attention that they both won on both sides. I was outside along with others. No one was out there to even give instructions to anyone to even suggest or recommend to write their names down. So that's one issue that I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. Another is the video that I had sent is dated the 20th. The last time I sent it to you, October 20th of 2020. And it was a video pertaining to voter intimidation within the city of Chester. This is when I was asking you not to allow for that one-stop machine to be placed inside Chester City Hall. And it was the mayor of Chester at that time, with his bullhorn on his truck, saying my mother was a fat bee all outside the polling place. And I remember you said at that point in time that it was going to be sent over to the DA. And I know Mr. Parks, I remember his comments were, you could not tell it was in the city of Chester. It was shot outside of the Days Inn, with 352 is right there, so you could see that it was, in fact, in the city. I do have individuals that were also there voting that day that would be willing to come and to, testify or to sign an affidavit to let you know what they witnessed. And this is something that goes on within the city every single election. And then with his nephew being on the ballot, his uncle is the mayor, you put the machine right there, then no one would ever want to run for anything because it's already going to be tainted from the beginning. So this is something that I hope and I pray that you take serious. There are seniors in that city that have been threatened. There are signed affidavits, and if you need to see them, I will bring them all here. People that even after they vote, they're told that they voted wrong. This is a serious issue that happens every single election. Affidavits were sent up to Harrisburg. The ones I sent, the return receipt was dated the 24th of February. I haven't heard anything back pertaining to that. So I just, as I said, I hope and I pray that you take this seriously, because there's an entire city that wants change, that wants something different, but they're not at this point allowed to have it due to the threats and the intimidation that they experience every time there's an election. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So first of all, thank you for coming forward, and thank you for your diligence in pursuing this and continuing to pursue this matter. To the extent you have additional information, affidavits, et cetera, that you haven't sent to us already, please send them to us, and we will send those to District Attorney's Office so that you can understand. The Board of Elections isn't an investigative body, right? We don't have detectives. We don't have persons to go out and gather this information and evaluate it and make determinations about whether it's violations of the election law. So what the code requires us to do is to take that information and forward that information to the appropriate persons who are the district attorneys. Okay. To the materials you sent to Harrisburg, I can't answer for Harrisburg, right? So with respect to this forthcoming election, I think I'll work with Mr. Parks and we'll make sure that we have appropriate personnel from the district attorney's office in the city of Chester at these locations to observe this on election day. And if we see something that's wrong, they will take action to respond to it. Okay. It is the intent of, and I think I can speak for everybody here, it's the intent for all of us on this board, it's the intent for the staff, for Mr. Allen, that we want to have free and fair elections. We want people encouraged to participate in the election. We don't want to see any of this conduct that you allege to take place. So,
yes, everyone, I always have your number. I call when there is something that's going on to report it immediately when it's taking place.
And that's, you know, that's important because I've sat here for a long time, right? And people come in and once it's a he said, she said, it's oftentimes very difficult to sort out the facts.
I
But
understand.
when we can see it on election day and someone can go there on
Yes.
election day and see what's happening and take action to enforce the rules on election day, that's really the best. So, you know, please work with us and continue to
I
work with
will.
us on election day. If you see things or if anyone in the public sees things, to report them promptly and we will take action.
Okay, I can forward them right over to you. Whatever I don't have in my bag at present, if it's not a clear enough copy, I can always scan it and email it. I have your emailing address if it's the same
Yes.
email. I don't know it offhand. So if you just let me know where you want it sent, I can do that.
Mr. Parks or Mr. Allen will work with you
Okay.
to tell you
Thank
exactly where
you.
to send it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to follow up on
Yes, sir.
11.6. 11.6 was one, as you pointed out, where there was a complaint filed, and we did then investigate. We handed over the materials to the district attorney's
Right.
office. The two individuals in 11.6 are not only disqualified from serving as poll workers, but I want you to know they also have agreed not to be any kind of candidate for the next decade, whether a write-in or otherwise. So they've signed an agreement where we were going to eliminate them as poll workers as it was based on the information that we had. However, additionally, district's attorney's office received an agreement from them that they cannot even, they've given the right, which is a rather extraordinary right, to run for office even as a write-in for the next decade.
Okay.
We did not, on the other hand, receive a complaint prior to certification regarding 11.4.
Correct.
If we had, we certainly would have looked into that. So I don't have an answer for you that will satisfy you on that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, and I believe that. I mean, you know, I knew that coming forth that the 11.4, you did not, because again, there wasn't anyone who was on the ballot that would have come to you because they would have been a harmed party. But what I'm saying to the board today is that both 11.6 and 11.4, they voted, I mean, they're, yes, it was in the same building, same room. And actually, the judges of election, the only difference in their votes is one vote. One 35, the other 36.
So I did, if that's a new report, even if it's, the election's been certified, should that, I still think that that should be considered for referral if she wants to make a new complaint. I mean, that sounds like a new and unpreviously reported complaint that could be referred to the DA's office for investigation.
I want to ask one point of clarification. I haven't heard anyone say, or haven't heard you say, with respect to this other judge of elections, that anyone has seen this judge of elections, observed this judge of elections filling in ballots. We had a report that these other people were filling in ballots for other voters.
Correct.
Now, if there's no report that this person filled in ballots, no one has seen that, then I'm not sure there's a
No,
basis
let's
to
clarify.
refer to
That's
the
what the
DA.
question I was going to ask is what was.
There is not a report, but he was working as judge of election while also he won a write-in campaign for judge of election.
That's not
to
at
be
all.
Yes,
clear.
and that is to be clear.
Just to be clear, that is perfectly legal to be working.
And you're right, and I also know that in order to, write-in campaigns are extremely difficult to win. I mean, you know, you have to have someone out there, even when you're not doing a write-in campaign. No one was outside mentioning, write my name down for judge of election or whatever the case may be. People were out there for Stefan Roots and other people, but no one, nothing, and he still won that election as well. Actually, you said that there's no law that against working the polls and being on the ballot?
No. And being on the board of elections, meaning on the board that's serving in that polling place. Now, if you're running for, auditor, tax collector, borough council, what have you, no, you cannot be working on the board. But if you're running for inspector or for judge of election, you can work in that precinct on Election Day.
Oh, okay.
Because you
Yes.
have to realize, as a practical matter, in many precincts, it's the same judge of elections for many, many years. So
Right.
you wouldn't be able to hold the election in the cycle that they're running for judge of elections
Right.
if they weren't there to run the polls. So there's an exception in the law that the local election board members are allowed to work the election where they're on the ballot.
Okay.
But no one else on the ballot can work in the polling place or be on the board of elections here for that.
Right. And I understand that, and I saw everyone writing when as a watcher, when no voters were in the polling place. I cannot say what exactly they were writing at that point in time until they noticed me, and then, and I showed my paperwork and so forth and so on. So, but I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I mean, me personally, I just think it's kind of ironic that both of them won their write-in campaign with a 1 vote difference. That's all.
Well, Mr. Chairman, why don't we suggest to Ms. Moten, and again, I'm new, so I'm sort of catching up. I wasn't here in 2020, but I don't know whether a complaint has been, formally lodged regarding 11-4. But if I understand what you're saying, and it certainly sounds like there might be some connection, but we don't know that.
Correct.
There's no witnesses saying that.
Correct.
Why don't you write up whatever the complaint is and submit it to the Board of Elections, and we'll take a look at that and
Okay.
refer it over. Just because there's not an eyewitness doesn't mean
Right.
that there shouldn't be something looked at, but just because, the same thing happened in the same room next to where somebody, misbehaved.
Right.
We can't jump to that conclusion, so. But
This is
if you
true.
write it up, and whatever affidavits you might have or evidence, why don't you submit it in, and we'll take a look at it, and like I said, typically what happens is send it over to DA's office, and they're the ones that, as the chairman said, have the investigators be able to
Okay.
go out and take a look.
Anything else? If not, I thank you for your time.
Anything from
Thank you,
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Montano.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with public comment? All right, seeing none.
I do
Yes.
think we had comment, Mr. Parks, someone was going to put on the record, I think the issue that was raised with the petition from Mr. Pupio, just to have it on the record, that a referral had been made.
Well, I'll just, maybe if I can, Mr. Chairman, just to confirm that the board had received a complaint from Attorney Michael Pupio regarding alleged irregularities for campaign finance reports, as well as other alleged election law violations for Ms. Thompson, who's a candidate for district judge in Springfield. The board all received that, and based on the allegations, that matter was, and the timing, with a short time before the election, that matter was referred to the district attorney's office. We just wanted to confirm that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Next meeting date, I can look in my book. I think we've already set that. That would be the certification. And
Yeah, as long as this relates to the legal notices earlier in the agenda. Ms. Hagan and I have discussed the possibility that the 18th, that is our target date for certifying the election. We may want to revisit that as we're, between the 2nd and when we have to publish a legal notice for that, in case we have a lot of write-in votes that we have to go through. So we remain interested in trying to certify on the 18th. The board technically meets on the 2nd to
convene
to convene,
yeah.
but for the election. But
Right,
and
our meeting here. And we would have until the 22nd, but
we have until the 22nd,
Would rather
but
not
our
hold it
goal
over
is
to
to
Thanksgiving
either
week,
by the
correct.
18th or the 19th. I also have to check on the availability of this room on the 19th. I'm
okay.
not sure.
So we haven't scheduled then for the certification meeting is fair enough. Very good. Anybody have anything else?
I did, and I beg your indulgence, still under being the new guy, a couple questions before. Just my observation, the transcription process that occurs, well, first of all, I want to publicly thank Mr. Allen. Like I said, even though I've been around elections for a long time in Delaware County, the process is new, with paper ballots and the HART system. So it's where there used to be 30 moving parts, there's now 270 moving parts. So I very much appreciate the job he and the board and the election Bureau has to undertake. And he took the time to sit with me for quite a while to answer many of my questions and bring me up to speed. So I want to publicly thank him for that. A couple questions that have come sort of popped in since that time is and this is based on, I was at the count in last November's election. A couple issues that I saw came up just to see, if we want to clarify. The placement of watchers, at the count center. I understand what the Supreme Court has ruled. My suggestion, just as one member, is that in order to make it a process that is open as possible and that leaves no doubt, again, I can say publicly that I didn't see any fraud or problems with what occurred in the process last November. But I would encourage us to be able to have watchers in areas similar to what we agreed upon last year, if they want to even do that, in order to leave no doubt with the public that what's going on. And the other part was especially the transcription process. And as the public, or as the board knows, but what occurs because we have paper ballots, some number of them get torn, there's a misprint, the barcode isn't aligned, and the computer can't read it for whatever reason. And the recommendation, as I understand it, from the Hart Intercivic system that puts these together is that you basically copy the ballot, onto a fresh ballot and destroy the other ballot or segregate it and keep it that way, which seems like a perfectly fine way to do it as long as we make it open and transparent to the public as possible so that no one gets the misimpression that somebody's sitting there filling these things out. So I certainly would recommend that we make it available for watchers from each party to sit at the tables where that process is taking place, if that's what's going to happen. And then just a question of the people that do the transcription process. I think Mr. Allen had answered this for me, that these will be employees of the election board. Is that the plan?
Yes.
I believe we used some volunteers last year.
So, and on all three things. So the placement of the watchers, there was a court case, and there was some negotiations beforehand, and then the court facilitated things, and I think we're fine. I mean, I certainly don't have any problem with where that was resolved, and the court drew a map that night and
I think it was very fair.
and we moved things a couple feet, and everybody was happy. So I think we set it up that way, and certainly to the extent we have the party chairs in beforehand to take a look like they have in the past, if they say, well, we'd rather do this or that, I think we're also, within reason willing to accommodate them, and I think that's fine. Second, the transcription, last year we did have watchers at the tables. I think eventually.
We did,
and so I don't see any problem with having that as long as there's watchers. If somebody wants to watch at the table the transcription, they should be permitted to.
Yeah, I don't think there's any issue with that. We do have to be mindful of the COVID distancing protocols to the extent they're in place. And what we did last November was that we had a transcription teams work in two, so that there's not one human being, but two sets of eyes on each transcription effort. And we had what I call church supper tables, with these folding tables that you have a group of two on one side, a group of two on the other side, long sides of the table. And then we had one watcher at each end of the table, which created enough distance for COVID protocols at the time that everybody was reasonably comfortable with that. And I think that works. Now, if circumstances change, it may be possible to slightly adjust that configuration, but we also have to be mindful that we can't have people so close to the materials that somebody could grab them and damage them or take them or destroy them. So there's a fine balance here between close enough to see what's going on and confirm the accuracy, but not so close that election records or the process is at risk. So, and obviously the health considerations. But I'm perfectly happy if the party leaders are happy with maintaining what we did last year with the tables and watcher at each end, and then they can obviously, I think what we did last year is gave them the opportunity every hour or so to just change seats so that way they're, they could see the other end of the table basically if they wanted to.
I think once we worked it out, it functioned well, and I think it was a very fair process. And I don't, if we can repeat that, that's there. And like I said, the other question I just had, I think we had volunteers, at least in part, that worked on that last year. If it's just going to be employees, that's fine. I would note if we change our mind, if we end up that, there's a higher turnout than expected, and we have a shortage of employees, and we need to make the call for volunteers, please, let everybody know that so that people can get the volunteers.
I believe,
or have the opportunity.
Right. I believe, and I could be wrong about this because I haven't verified it with everyone, but my understanding at least is that the people who are doing the transcriptions were primarily, if not exclusively, staff through Monarch. So they weren't volunteers. I think they were paid, temporary employees because we have to scale up our staff for those types of elections. We bring in people from Monarch, which is the staffing service the county uses, and that's, I believe, who was doing that work.
I believe it was clearly folks that were coming in that, were not regular employees of the county. And
right, and that's because our staff, outside of a general presidential election is a fraction of the size. I think we had 4 or 5 permanent staff members
I think everybody
before we ramped up for that election, so we wouldn't have had enough people to do everything and have those human beings do that job too.
Okay, and then I just had an additional question about drop boxes, and somebody asked me this yesterday, and I said, I don't know, I'll have a meeting tomorrow. The monitoring of the drop boxes, I think Mr. Savage or Mr. Allen said we start with those tomorrow morning. What's the process for monitoring those?
The cameras have been on those 24/7 actually already for, I want to say at least a week. So, because we initially were hoping to have the vote by mail ballots in the mail a lot sooner than we were able to. So, Park Police made arrangements with IT. So the cameras have been on those, even though they're locked shut for a week. And they're on 24/7. They're monitored by Park Police 24/7. Obviously, there's been no activity thus far, but we've alertified Park Police that now we're taking the blockers off so that the slots will be open and voters will be able to use those.
Right, and so that's the Park Police office is here in the courthouse?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then this is a question I didn't know the answer to. I don't know if Mr. Chairman, Mr. Parks would be, that somebody said, well, and I don't know whether this is a correct premise or not. They said that the drop boxes were there based upon the emergency orders that were in place because of COVID, not Act 77. What's the current legal authority for being able to place drop boxes? I said, that's a good question. I don't know. I will ask that tomorrow.
Yeah, I think the premise is wrong. I don't believe that the drop boxes were at all a function of some emergency order due to COVID. That is, and in fact, I think there's a Pennsylvania Supreme Court case on this very clear issue that there's a debate about whether there was a debate about whether the election code as amended by Act 77 and Act 12 had permitted the use of drop boxes or not. That went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court affirmed that drop boxes are permitted, which is why there's any number of legislative efforts right now to revise the election code and do away with drop boxes or limit their use and so forth. That's because the law of Pennsylvania right now, unrelated to COVID, is drop boxes are legal and permitted.
So they were not a creature of an emergency COVID order.
Correct.
It was at least statutory based from Act 77 as interpreted by the Supreme Court.
That's correct,
yes. If I may add to that, we're right now a creature of the fact that when Act 77 took place, then COVID had an impact on the number of people applying. The Board of Elections sent out invitations to all 49 communities, and essentially 42 responded, we want one. And just recently, one of the very few who said no initially contacted me and said, we want to have a drop box. This is Chester Township wants to have a drop box added there for May. So, depending on what the law says at that time, I would be inclined to accommodate Chester Township because it's become something like we want it too. This happened also in Newtown Township. They said we only want it through December, and then their voters said no, we really want it. So then we ended up reinstalling it for this election.
Right. Well,
And I don't think it's, Mr. McBlain, wrong to think that the energy behind the emphasis on making sure that we could get those drop boxes deployed properly under the law was at least inspired in part by the concern about the safety and the shortages we anticipated of poll workers and the increased use of mail-in ballots. So perhaps that's why that person interpreted it in the way that they did.
Yeah, and as I said, I have no objection to drop boxes, but it's a yin and a yang. It provides more access for people to be able to vote. But anytime you spread it out or make more steps, as I referenced, rather than 60 steps, there's now 270 steps, that adds a variance into it. So, there are people that are concerned regarding the security of the drop boxes and really the idea of preventing, ballot harvesting, which we all agree is illegal. The more it gets spread out, the perhaps easier it is to go there. I might stop by the Park Police Office just to kind of take a look at what they are looking at, but that's a Herculean job how many are there now? 42, did you say?
Yes, sir.
So we would have
and counting
42 different screens, 24/7, being monitored by a Park Police officer. That's a Herculean job. So, but that's it. But that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your indulgence on my new background.
I did have one thing, and you hesitated as a lawyer to ask a question. You're not 100% sure of the answer, but I think you touched on transcription before. Isn't that also in the code? Doesn't the code have the process that we use for the transcription? Isn't that dictated by a section of the code, not just the?
As I sit here, I do not recall specifically if the code expressly contemplates transcription, but there are, I believe there are provisions in the code dealing with damaged and unreadable ballots. So
yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about, and the transcription process is what it uses. And then secondly, in the approval materials or documents for the Hart machine, which is you might have seen it before in your prior role at County Council. It's a huge, hundreds of pages long, that the materials they submitted to the state and then the state used to approve it. All these procedures are detailed in there, and then part of the certification for the use of that equipment. So there's a legal, at least an administrative justification for it. I do also think that the process is contemplated by the mutilated ballot sections of the code.
All four of the major manufacturers, by the way, have some kind of process where a damaged ballot cannot be read by the scanner, like you said. It has to be remade. And the advantage we're going to have with the retention of the use of lever numbers is that you're not going to be reading candidates' names, so you eliminate the risk that if two like-sounding names are on the ballot, the transcription could go awry. So they're reading the numbers next to that, and it becomes a very nonpartisan, dry affair for two poll workers to read off a number and mark it, and they check each other's work as they go along. It's a very slow and tedious process, but
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't have an objection to the process. I don't have a better answer or a better way to do it. There's a bit of irony in that 20 feet away from where we did this transcription process, you've got this billion-dollar machine that does everything but transport you into space. And then we have a very sort of basic process for damaged ballots of, people sit there and sort of, just redo it. So like I said, I don't have an objection. I don't have a better alternative to suggest. Right. My questions, I hope, or what I tried to go towards is just making that, based on last year, as open, a process as possible, so people know what's going on, and we don't have, accusations of people just casting ballots, like in 11-6,
Well, I certainly understood your comments in that spirit, although I would note that based on what we saw in November, no amount of access will limit such accusations.
Right.
Well, that's correct, but all we can do is appeal to the general public and their reasonableness.
And to that end, I would add, just in yesterday's management meeting, we were discussing the possibilities of moving the whole V-Drive reception area to the front of the room, so that could also be witnessed, so that as we're opening the envelopes, removing the V-Drives, and preparing then to move them just a few feet away instead of across the room, so that we add to the transparency of it, and it doesn't look like V-Drives are coming out of somewhere else. So we're trying to be very cognizant of the very issues that you're raising.
I think that's a good idea, and I know that you described the process. There always are a dozen or so judges of election that don't return their materials on election night, whether it's 1980 or 2021. And when those V-Drives come back, we want to make sure again, that's an open process so that no one gets the idea that Mr. Savage walks in with a bag, full of computer chips and, he's just adding votes somewhere. So to mark it up so that, we record it. Mr. Manley referred to the chain of custody, that we have that so that it's, people know exactly what's going on at all times.
Right, and for the record, Mr. Savage was protecting the chain of custody from the warehouse to the wharf at the time, so.
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay.
It's not a good example.
No, it was.
All right. There appearing to be no other business?
No other questions.
We are adjourned. Thank you.